Welcome, everybody, to Bar Talk, episode 20. I am your host, John Foley. With me, as always, Courtney Booms.
Hello.
Marc Miller.
Hello.
Coming to you from the Relief and Resource in Fenton, Michigan, courtesy of iLogic Media. Please check out their other content if you have not. But today is the first in our, what will be a series of episodes where we talk about people in the industry that have made a gigantic difference. And it was very easy to choose the first one because we're going to dive right into David Wondrich, cocktail author, historian, and really a massive influence on anybody who does this job and also reads about it.
Yeah. In like an entirely serious tone at the very least.
Absolutely. Yeah. And his influence on the resurgence of classic cocktails in contemporary bartending is immeasurable. Mm-hmm. Plus, he's really smart and really funny. And our bar is in a tiny little town, so he'll probably never come here. But if he does, we'll make him a great drink. Yeah. But let's talk about the gentleman because he's well published.
He's well published. He's an academic.
He is an academic.
He's
an academic first, and then he came to cocktail writing afterwards. But you've got the bio, and we'll talk a little bit about him as we go along. But we're going to learn about the gentleman today.
Yeah, so I've got like a mini biography if we wanted to start off with that, and then maybe talk about his writings, and then some projects and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably be guilty of focusing on one book more than the others because I think that book is probably one of the most 4 or 5 important books that you can have on a cocktail library. Not a beverage library because there's lots of great beer and wine books, books about service. But if you have a cocktail library, this book is quintessentially important. Yeah,
definitely. So just kind of going over brief biography first. David Wondrich was originally from, I believe I'm pronouncing this right, Monongalia, Pennsylvania, which is about 17 miles south of Pittsburgh, so basically Pittsburgh adjacent.
Coal country.
Yeah.
Steel country.
Yeah. A lot of times too, like for instance, we're in Fenton. If I'm traveling and no one knows what the heck is Fenton, I'll say like it's Flint adjacent. That kind of same idea.
And it's not Fenton, it's Fenton.
So this is more Deer Hunter than Rocky.
Yeah.
Rocky was Philly. Deer Hunter
was
was more Pittsburgh adjacent.
Speaking of Rocky, from a young age, David Wondrich had aspirations of becoming a rock star. He was a musician.
Not a boxer, though.
No, just the word rock.
Oh.
I have to make associations for the jump sometimes.
Okay.
Go rock.
So
Stop it. That is the first. I'm sorry. That's the first and last Bob Seger reference on the show, or I'm gonna tear it all down.
We can't get the copyrights anyway, Marc. Come on.
No, but it's just. All right.
So David Wondrich, he does have major dreams of becoming a rock star, but he has a propensity for academics. So he's really good at school, but he does drop out of college to try and he just like plays gigs in local bars. He's in New York at this point. He's mostly sipping Gibson martinis. That was his go-to when he's in the old man bars, because if he tried to order anything else, I think in an interview he called them woo-woo drinks. Anything that involved more than like 3 ingredients, you would get shit canned possibly, or just like generally
become
hated.
a woo girl.
Yeah.
A woo boy.
Yeah. So
it's funny because
Gibson
I
martinis.
drank Gibsons too when I first started like getting into cocktails, and I think it's because I still to this day don't like olives in my martinis, and I couldn't I never had a proper lemon zest in a martini, so I ordered Gibsons because I thought they were super cool, and it didn't end up tasting salty. At the end. I think the rock star thing is interesting too. Like you see, it's something like you make fun of in this industry. Like, oh, well, you were a musician, but you could be a musician, so you're a bartender. You couldn't write the great American novel, or your acting career clearly stalled, so you're a bartender. But I think that's what also makes this industry kind of interesting, because you do have a lot of people who have great artistic interests and have a ton of adjacent stuff that they're really into, and then that informs the service and the culture.
Well, personal charisma can really make the difference. Yeah, so
it's funny in one hand, but it's what makes a lot of bars cool.
Yeah, so generally he's enjoying the atmosphere of the bar life, but eventually he turns about 25 and, quote, says, if you didn't make it to the stardom by the age you were 25, it was unlikely to happen. So he returns to academics. He finishes his degree. He has a doctorate in comparative literature. He got that from New York University, and eventually he finds work as a Shakespeare and freshman comp professor on Staten Island at St. John's University.
Good basketball team, usually.
I didn't know that.
Sometimes they sneak up.
He's a junior professor when he starts, just like anyone who starts, you kind of have to work your way up. But he didn't really like it. He was mostly told by higher administrators or older professors like to do all this work that he didn't really want to do because he's on committees, right? So he's been delegated this work.
Well, because it's not all teaching.
Yeah, it's not all teaching. It's a lot more than that.
Like bartending, like the when you see us bartend, that's
just the show.
That's a small part of it.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of other stuff that goes into the actual service of a bar.
The background is a lot more. But yeah, I mean, in general, his mentality is like, I don't want to be here any more than any of my students do. So he starts trying to find ways out of it, so to speak. His wife is supportive of him finding a different career. He loves music, so he goes to jazz clubs and he writes critiques of jazz music that he listens to. Eventually, some of his friends see that, and one of them ends up being he owns a subsidiary of Esquire magazine. He wants him to start writing for him, and then eventually Esquire magazine specifically asks him to start writing drink reviews. Kind of bringing up old classic drinks, the Manhattan, the Martini, etc., daiquiri, and kind of writing like little blurbs about that once a week for their newspaper, and he's making pretty good money for that.
And then they're the lit comp and the history and the desire to tell stories and all of it kind of just
wraps
dovetail.
up.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I think Harvey Picard, the comic book artist, also wrote jazz reviews.
I didn't know
in
that.
his spare time.
Really?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, because he was always going to like thrift stores and garage sales and trying to find like, cheap ass copies of stuff.
So if you want like a better job, just start writing jazz reviews, and then maybe it'll go to a higher degree.
No, now it's really sad. It's like, you don't write jazz reviews, you just write lists.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Top 15 jazz albums to help you get over yourself.
Well, you really got
on a Tuesday.
It's within the title that you really sell it, so you get those. It's clickbait, This is what it is. Yeah.
It's the jazz influencer, if you like.
5 jazz albums that are super influential and 5 that are overrated.
Do you want to hear
a bunch of ads in between?
The most pretentious, self-indulgent saxophone solo is in this song. Dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, that's it.
But he naturally falls into the role being a curioso of drinks and having drank plenty of places when he was a musician and generally being curious, right? So,
and he's in New York, which makes that a lot easier.
Oh, super easy. Yeah. Compared to Monongalia, potentially. I don't really know. But not to diss you, Monongalia. I have no idea. But
knuckle sandwich is what you're going to get.
Basically, his start with Esquire meant he was able to use his interests in drinking culture, and combine it with his training to do archival and educational based research. So he not only is he writing like little snippets and anecdotes, eventually he starts from those shortened little paragraphs to delve deeper into the history, categorizing drinks into different families, which is something we do today and have mentioned before for other writings, like Death and Co. or Dead Rabbit.
Yes.
And researching ingredients lost to the annals. So like maraschino liqueur, Luxardo maraschino liqueur. We use that in tons of drinks. It's readily available now, but at the time that he was doing this around the late 90s, early 2000s, like you'd have to special order that or have someone smuggle it into you from like Europe.
In Fenton, in the early 2000s, it was hard to carry all the time because I don't think the ordering on the state level was up to the demand that us bartenders wanted.
Yeah,
but I think that's what, and we'll get into this more with the Jerry Thomas book, but what Wondrich was always really concerned about, and what I think is awesome, is the families of cocktails and the bills, and these classic bills that were used back then that can still be applied now. And he was always writing about how, okay, this is how they did it then. This is how you do it now.
Right.
This is the best way to do it now in a modern setting. And that's invaluable stuff for somebody who's learning how to bartend.
Yeah, recipe updates, basically, for like lack of better words. Some of those ingredients aren't findable, but you can find something similar. And if you modify your sweet because this is drier, Yeah, and this is what vermouth tasted like then. And that's why the proportions were that way. But vermouth tastes like this now. And this is why you should do it this way now. And a bunch of his recipes have that, and that was really, really useful. And we've mentioned this a couple times too, that like vermouth came along a lot later than a lot of people I think of vermouth coming, because it's like what, in like the 80s,
1870s,
1880s, 1870s.
Could you imagine like, oh boy, got to come with me to the bar, get a load of this new stuff. It's called vermouth. Knock you right on your keister.
I love your
1800s. My old timey.
His old timey ways.
Yeah.
Apparently he's an good. Yeah.
Come on, be a sport. We're gonna check out that new baseball. Have some vermouth.
Have you heard of those investigators?
Don't have too many of a tipple, or you end up in Trolley Con in San Francisco.
Nothing like some ballpark hot dogs and vermouth.
Yeah, well, but like you see it in Oscar Wilde too. They were drinking Hock and soda.
Yeah,
But Hock is just fucking vermouth.
Yeah,
Yeah, but vermouth was hotness.
It's like an Americano.
Deal. Yeah, it was a big deal in it.
It's all the rage.
Yeah.
So, of course, like we were saying, he does write for Esquire. He's writing about these things like drink recipe changes, but he's also talking about like top bars in the area. He's also talking about he writes lots of articles about like how to enjoy a crappy bar, like how to make yourself at home, which we did in our second episode.
On
that. A lot of my favorites, or I'm gonna list a couple favorites that I've gotten subscription to Esquire magazine doing this research and started like just reading a couple articles randomly.
Because of course she did.
Research thorough. One was How to Give a Better Toast from the February 2020
Oh, you gotta
issue.
send me that because so many people are crappy at giving toast.
This is why I like the article. He's very sarcastic in it a lot about like what you expect, what you see, and then what you should be doing. So it's a really good one.
Don't make it about you.
Right.
Please don't make it about you. And that thing that you're saying that you think is funny that you said at every toast since college, it's not funny.
It's not funny.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks it's super, super lame.
We don't need your dad jokes in a toast.
Ugh.
We don't. Okay.
No.
Other ones are how cocktail culture survived Prohibition in World War II. This is a much more serious article. I really enjoyed that one. September 2015 is when it came out. When it comes to champagne bottles, go big or go home. An endorsement of the Magnum.
Yeah.
December 2015.
Better for the liquid.
Pack of
I am
Magnums.
also this way about like certain session or saison beers or German beers. Yeah, bigger, better.
Bigger, better.
Yeah,
well,
have a
no,
big
but
old
it is like Magnums and larger sized bottles, Methuselims, etc., Jerobums. I never ever pronounce that word. That is better for wine to sit.
Well, and the fermentation, the bubbles, like it actually continues to make interesting spirit in there as it sits in those
Much more
giant bottles.
badass
I love that.
than cracking a Magnum of champagne. When people walk in,
Especially if there's just like two of you.
just so you know, I
Let's
only
get real
have
romantic up in here.
so many cubes of cheese and a minimal amount of crackers,
but I do have.
This is gonna get weird.
This much champagne.
I also have a saber for it, so here we go.
Can you saber?
love savoring.
Can I? Absolutely not.
I can.
Really?
Yeah.
Pixar didn't have.
On the next
Well, it's
episode
been
of
a
this
long time.
podcast.
I would definitely need to practice, but I can saber a bottle of champagne.
We should do that, and we'll insert it into an episode one time. Be like, this is John sabering.
Just like cut midway.
Yeah, I'd have to
Just be like-
practice, but it's been like years. But I can do it. I was sabering a bottle in the adjacent like catering kitchen area of the event space for the laundry, not in the restaurant proper.
Yeah.
I was practicing, so I had it in the freezer. I had it stored, and I'm like, I'm going to practice with a couple bottles before New Year's Eve so I can do it on New Year's Eve in the bar. And I right as I'm about to strike, poor Ashley Burton, who used to work there. She comes out of the bathroom, and I just let it go, and the neck of this thing flies right by her face.
Oh my
and she like stops dead in her tracks. I'm like, I almost killed you. And she's like, that was really cool, but really scary. So like if you're gonna practice sabering a bottle, like don't do it around other people. I almost killed somebody. She's a mother of twins now, and
Really lovely lady,
really,
lovely lady.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't take that from her. Eyeball. Yeah. Sorry, Ash.
By way of champagne.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mean, Esquire is where he got his start, but he does continue to write. So to do a quick bibliography, if you will, so you first have Esquire Drinks, an opinionated and irreverent guide to drinking. So it's basically a collection of a lot of his little articles about certain drinks, and it's a continuation from that in said magazine. It hits shelves in 2004. Excuse me, actually happened because another publishing house started publishing David Wondrich's articles from Esquire, a book that Esquire had set out before him, but had included his articles. And so Esquire, they didn't ask for any permission from them. So they were just like, fuck it. We're just going to have David Wondrich send us another book. We're going to publish it online.
They said, fuck it, we'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
Okay, we'll do it live.
And you can Google still to this day. You can just go in and Google like the Manhattan Wondrich, and you'll just get
it'll come up. Yeah, exactly.
On any of the stuff.
Yeah. The next release he has for books is Killer Cocktails. It's mainly a guide to building your home bar, and includes tons of classics, obviously. So that came out in 2005. In 2007, he publishes Imbibe. So that's arguably his most famous cocktail book.
Yeah.
It's basically a deep dive into Jerry Thomas's contributions, but he writes particularly eloquently. It's funny. It's informative. It's a fantastic book. It does win the James Beard Award. And it gets.
They should give it 2 more.
2 more beard awards?
Sure, why
He's
not?
nominated
Just
for
dust
other
one.
ones. Yeah.
Just dust another one off and give it to him for that book. 'Cause that book is so important.
It's really good.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I have some excerpts I'm going to read from him because he's a fantastic writer.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll go with that in just a minute, though. Yeah.
Oh, whenever you tell me it's okay.
It's okay. It's published in 2007 and then republished again in 2010. Shortly after republished in 2012. In 2010, he writes Punch. So it's a similar design for the book. For those who just saw the one that John has, I've got mine here. This is Punch. It's the same idea. It's a historical basis for the first social cocktail, if you like, which is the Punch Bowl.
And him expanding on a chapter of the Imbibe book and just getting a whole nother book out of it.
It was just a short.
There's so much more. There's a lot of history in Punch.
Huge history
in that particular book.
Is the first mixed cocktail, so to speak.
Yeah, the first time you put stuff together instead of drinking it on its own.
Yeah. And then his most recent publication is the Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, a project he completed with fellow Daily Beast writer Noah Rothbaum.
An absolute beast of the book.
Yeah, that is a very hefty,
in October
hefty
of
book right there.
2021. John, you got this recently for the bar, so I think you dipped your toe in it a little bit.
And it's a reference book. It's not. You don't have to read it A to Z. I mean, it's
like an encyclopedia.
Correct, and it's a book that's very, very useful if you want to have. If you're somebody who's cultivating a complete knowledge of spirits and cocktails, and you want to be able to reference and have on hand something to say about anything, and it covers industry luminaries, it covers spirits, it covers distillation, it covers regional history. It's
as easy as so a guest asks you what's falernum, you give them a short answer, you decide you'd like to go a little bit deeper into it, you find falernum in this book.
And even if you want to acquire a couple sentences to say about that, you would
dip your toe in it.
You would, and I think it's really cool to have around if we have younger people who want to learn more.
Oh yeah,
you could say, okay, well, if somebody asks you exactly what that is at a table, it's okay to say, well, this is what I know about it. I'll find out more. And then, before your next shift, you can go to that book and look at it and
then when they're
educate yourself a little bit. Or what I also find useful is if a guest asks what's falernum and I have the book at hand, I mark the page and then physically throw the book at them.
Yes.
This book?
This book, yeah. Yes. And I don't do like a little loft. I really kind of I hammer it like at an axe throwing
full rotation.
And if they can catch it, they get a free drink. And if they don't catch it, they get a free bruise.
Bruise.
From the book.
Not brew. Bruise.
Yeah.
All right. I will never ask you a question about drinks while sitting at your bar.
Especially not to learn them.
No, we just got it. So we're still kind of wading our way through it. But it's exactly what I expected from Wondrich.
Yeah.
Comprehensive, extraordinarily well written, and just deeply useful. He has a good understanding of what an industry person or somebody who's got an academic interest in the subject matter needs from him as a writer.
Oh yeah. So this would be the point where I'm like, you can talk about Imbibe now if you like, because we've switched into just a general bibliography to kind of deep diving into the books. Sure. Imbibe is next. Also, for those of you who have been watching this podcast, if you see Marc's arm kind of tweak over every once in a while,
we got some new sound equipment, and he's really excited to play with it.
We are very excited.
Yeah.
And it makes me sound louder.
I told you about touching my microphone, though, man.
Listen. We don't want the fuzzy wuzzies. We don't want the fuzzy wuzzies.
Oopsie doopsies.
He was only a bear.
None of that.
And we don't want it.
So one of the things that I think is just unbelievable about this book, and what he's doing is he's kind of looking at the history of cocktails through one man and one man's era. At least at first, it's Jerry Thomas. So he's writing about Jerry Thomas, who was the first superstar bartender by virtue of being the first bartender who wrote any of this shit down. Like he's the first one to put recipes down on paper.
A bon vivant's guide.
Bon vivant's guide. Bon vivant's companion.
Drinking companion.
Yeah. A bon vivant's companion. And he did at the time something that was considered, like something you don't do, which is write all this stuff down. Like he didn't believe that the recipes were something that you had to keep secret. He wanted to share them.
Right.
Which, Jerry Thomas, not Wondrich, but Jerry Thomas. And he essentially is using this to be the first bartender to truly build his own brand.
Yes.
Like, this is me. I'm the dude. I got the brass buttons on my vest.
Right.
I'm the showiest, motherfucker out here. Come drink at my bar because I know it and I'm so confident about it. I'm going to tell you how to do it.
And that's like, he has a deep love for Jerry Thomas in a way, because he's like literally the first, you said bar star, I said entertainment bartender. Same idea. He writes this manual in 1862. He had at that point bars in New York, in Cleveland, I want to say.
He had been all over,
Cincinnati, maybe instead of Cleveland, New Orleans, San Francisco. He had already hit there as well.
Wondrich talks about this, and I love this phrase, the sporting crowd.
Yeah.
And the idea of being a sport.
Yeah, he'd throw those blue blazers over his head so, and fire raining down, and people are freaking out and having a good time. He had a bar underneath P.T. Barnum's American Museum on Broadway in New York.
Which is awesome.
And this spot, it had bowling, it had dancing, you could go to the museum, you could come down.
Entertainment bar.
The first entertainment bar, one of the things that he focuses on there is a shooting range where he's actually hired ladies from P.T. Barnum, and all these ladies are just sitting there chilling with their rifles, and they're like, "You think you could shoot a shot against me? You think you can make this shot instead of me?" And these guys are getting repeatedly drunk, like continuously drunk, and they're just like, I can shoot something better than you. Of course I can. And they'd be like, "Well, I'll get you another free drink if you can shoot better than me."
Watch this, Yeg.
Yeah.
He's 5 brandy crosses in. He's going to slurp down another. No way he'll outshoot old Hillary.
But these ladies were like
dead-eye shot.
They didn't know that they were like trained professionals, so they would just get lit as heck. Just
What
trying
an awesome game.
be more masculine, I guess.
But I think like his history about how he ties the birth of cocktail culture into like sporting culture, and by sporting I mean gambling and and horse racing is excellent. And I think that he truly is interested in American history and in this kind of culturally rich underbelly that is super fun to write about. I think I have here. Yeah, so he also has a big affection for writing about the Prince of Wales.
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
a big drinker as well. No, not at that time.
Prince Eddie.
Oh, yes,
the
one who is also he's also the one who
he toured America all over.
He did.
Hollis,
with Hollis, yes,
Simpson, or something. Simpson.
Yes,
and they have a little bit about
seen
that.
The Crown.
You've seen The Crown. You know The Crown. Yes, and this is about when. Yes, this is about when he supposedly met Jerry Thomas. So they asked the prince, has he ever drunk a mint julep, sir? No, the prince had not. Yes, he would. And here's the kicker. Thompson led the prince into a famous barroom presided over by no less famous Jerry Thomas, one of the great artists in his line or time. That's a direct quote. His Royal Highness watched the, quote, elaborate and picaresque style of manufacture practiced by the mixers of elixirs in those antebellum days with profound curiosity and admiration, took a sip and said, "Why, it's only lemonade after all," revised his opinion as the julep glow suffused him and pronounced it, quote, "very, very nice." End of anecdote. Now, if there were ever two people who should have met, they were the Prince of Wales and Jerry Thomas. They had much in common, from a deep curiosity into the composition of drinks to an interest in the operation of the rules of probability to an unshakable personal dignity leavened with humor.
Drinking, gambling, and jokes.
Exactly. But that's how Wondrich writes. He's extremely smart,
very eloquent,
and really into kind of like grabbing you by the coat sleeve and bringing you on a journey.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
I mean, if you think about it, the title is Imbibe from absinthe cocktail to whiskey smash, a salute in stories and drinks to the Professor Jerry Thomas, pioneer of the American bar, featuring the original formula. I mentioned the long title because he's literally so inclusive about everything. So it's a lively read for bartenders, cocktail enthusiasts, super humorous in most cases, historically informative about slings,
just like good writing,
fizzes, toddies, sours. Yeah.
And he's very funny. And he has a beautiful reverence for certain cocktails, like the Fish House Punch.
Which is
my favorite punch.
Yeah. This is his introductory paragraph about the drink. The Fish House Punch is thrice blessed. Its name is memorable and strangely alluring. Its history is august and eccentric. And its formula is delicious and deadly. The greatest of all American punches, it deserves to be protected by law, taught in schools, and made a mandatory part of every 4th of July celebration, with dilute proportions given to those not yet of legal age, so that they may be accustomed to its taste.
Yeah, I mean, I completely
small
agree.
beers kind of mentality there, right? Small beers,
Mini beers
mixed with lemonade.
That drink is literally so good, though.
It's dope.
I love
It's a great cocktail, yeah, and it's good on an individual level.
Yeah,
and I have made it in long form punch too, and it's just fantastic.
rock and roll.
Yeah, and that's like read punch too, because making punch is very, very difficult, but really, really satisfying if you get it right.
Oh yeah. So the full title for Punch is Punch: The Delights and Dangers, in quotes, of the Flowing Bowl. So it is in short, a paragraph or two, maybe a whole chapter in Imbibe.
It's a whole chapter.
It's a whole chapter in Imbibe, but it's an entire book here. So they dive deep into the history. It kind of starts off with structure and style, but they go into the fact that it really, historically speaking, was like a way for sailors to avoid scurvy, but more deliciously so, right? So you've got the daiquiri and the gimlet, which we mentioned before, and I think the first or second
also the social aspect of it, right? Like
that's the other part.
Hanging out around the punch bowl.
Yeah,
just like when you have a party, you invite everybody to your house, but then at the end of the party, everybody's in the kitchen. Like they're all just standing in the kitchen.
It's weird how that happens,
You've
right?
provided scene and music, but all of a sudden everybody's just nailing drinks. In the kitchen.
That's almost exactly how it happens. So it starts with sailors, and then people that sailors are being employed by, so really landed gentry or royals or just like higher ups in general, they start to be like, what do you got over there? What's that over there? It sounds really interesting. And they're like chugging it down. So they start to develop these like more refined versions of the sailor's punch. Dutch punch in particular are the ones that like the Dutch swear up, down, left, right, and center that their punches are the best because it's made with things like brandy or arak or rum. Punches don't really come along until later. That's mostly like during Prohibition and post-Prohibition, when like all these bartenders have this excess rum because you can only get 1 bottle of rye if you get 6 bottles of rum, which is kind of like an old school.
Do you think did the Dutch use Jennifer?
Necessity?
Jennifer. Did they use Jennifer in their punches?
I think they would. So I think they would just call that. It was like Dutch malt spirit is often what it's called, because we mentioned in the podcast that it was a precursor to gin, but really it tasted closer to whiskey, which we also mentioned. They would have used a lot of that, and then they would have spiced it up a lot of things that they would have had in the spice trade: nutmeg, cinnamon, anise.
Yeah, you do see nutmeg is very popular in early punches.
Yeah, and in the book Punch, it's
spice element.
Yeah,
it's argued that India kind of starts the punch, or generally speaking, the Asian regions start the punch, but it gets sent along via the English imperial.
Travels with the Navy.
Yeah, that's why they start.
You get promoted on a boat if you could make a good punch.
Oh yeah,
you can be like, now you're the captain's man.
You're the admiral.
You're the captain's man.
So yeah, they all enjoyed a good punch. Like literally every class, by the time that the punch was the most popular, anyone and everyone could have punch. You can have cheap as heck gin punch in say Gin Lane, like we talked about before, or you could have it at the highest possible.
The poshest of social.
The king and queen.
Who do you think was more valued on the ship? The guy who could make the best punch or the cook?
Yes.
Punch. The punch.
Probably punch.
Yeah. I'm getting seasick, so I ain't eating nothing on that boat. So.
Like if you made good food, that doesn't nearly make up for bad punch as like good punch makes up for bad food.
That's very true. Because even shitty food can taste good if you're drunk enough.
On good punch, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of my favorite parts of Wondrich's writing isn't necessarily about the history, but the way he elaborates small details. For instance, there's a quick quip under the subheading Meriton Latroon's Bantam Punch, which is under the chapter of Arak Punch, which is one of my arguably favorite punches. It's a costly ingredient.
And here we mean an Indonesian Dutch spirit, not the anise-based Middle Eastern spirit.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Because there's a big difference depending on where you're from or what you've experienced. If you hear us say Arak, it's going to mean one thing or another.
Thank you. Yeah. Arrack.
Yes.
I don't think they're spelled the same, so that should help.
I think the other is, it's just Arak.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Sorry if I messed that up.
But under this part, right, arak is an incredibly costly ingredient. It came from the East. Sailors and privateers would find equal parts of joy in drinking it and pain in the expense of it. And for such a lavish spirit. If people don't know, Batavia is a port on the Isle of Java under the Dutch East Indies, which today corresponds to Jakarta, Indonesia. In his research, though, he comes across an early English fiction writer, Richard Head, a hilarious nom de plume if it's not his real name, because the shorthand of Richard is Dick.
He's just a dickhead.
Who, in his work, The English Rogue, described in the life of Martin Latrun a witty extravagant. His notes put, for witty extravagant read, utter scumbag.
Utter scumbag, not a sport.
No,
no,
utter scumbag. So in the story, this expert swindler finds himself in unlikely events. He falls into a street called China Row, where he meets and marries an Indian punch housekeeper so that he can be supplied with 2 quarts of rack tea punch for the rest of his life.
Indian punch housekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
That's a hell of a title.
that's a good one.
He's living the life O'Reilly, as it were. Stories like that are prevalent throughout the book. Yeah.
To give you another example of his writing, just to bring this back, because the Prince of Wales cocktail is also another like kind of great fruit-based cocktail. And this is from the description of the Prince of Wales cocktail, but it's also kind of, I was just reminded of it because of the way he talks about people. The prince was a pup, a gay dog, a lech, a lush, a charming, if stout son of a bitch. Said bitch being Queen Victoria.
Hey.
Oh.
He watched decade after decade roll by with her grasping the reins of power for dear life and nothing for him to do in the official line but wave to the nice folks. So he did what everybody else would have done. He got grumpy, he got loose. Mistresses and mischief ensued. He spent a lot of time at the table, the theater, and the club. He spent somewhere along there, he learned how to make a pretty fair variation on the improved whiskey cocktail. In fact, one of the sportiest on record. If his circumstances had been different, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, would have made a hell of a bartender. He loves these characters.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a British historian, I try not to speak too much one way or the other about the royal family, but it sounds real reminiscent of certain other heirs to the throne who are waiting maybe for their moms to die or whatever.
Hanging out.
You know, she's got the...
Are they sporty?
I heard about
She's
that.
What's his improved whiskey cocktail taste like? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
I read an article or a headline for an article that said like, now that the queen has COVID, she's like one heavy wind blow away from biting the dust.
No, she's vaccinated. Come on now.
No. Yes, with alien embryonic technology.
Yeah.
I always thought they were werewolves.
Probably. They'll never know.
Doctor Who fans know exactly what I'm talking about.
They kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, both of these books are super playful, incredibly fun. Honestly, even if I wasn't into cocktails, I feel like I would enjoy reading it.
They're so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little technical in some parts, so you'd kind of have to like glaze over it. But at the same time, it's really, really fantastic. The Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, however, is super technical in most parts, although still light in others.
Less a narrative-driven book and more a guide.
Yeah.
It is a reference piece first and foremost.
It's really an encyclopedia in a way. It's in the same way that the Oxford Companion to Beer or Wine, because those have been published works and like for food as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this companion, the first in its kind in relation to high gravity alcohol, if you think about it.
Yes.
Which is kind of crazy because cocktails have been part of social life since probably at least the 12th century, or for written records, the 17th century.
But a book like this has to hit when it's still a very viable part of the culture.
Like it's in a renaissance.
Right. And I didn't think, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, that wasn't the time.
No.
And plus you have to have two people who are willing to do all of the work to actually make an Oxford Companion of anything. Or
even have cocktail historians, right? Because we talked about Jerry Thomas having been one of the first to write down, recipes, but he wasn't really a historian in any way. He just...
No, he was hyping recipes and himself.
Made a point to write it down.
I was the guy who did this first, so come to my bars.
So that was, so I mentioned before, so that's Wondrich and then Noah Rothbaum, and they did put forth a huge amount of effort. I think there's over 1,200 cocktail recipes in this book.
Yeah, it's such an awesome.
That is a beast of a book.
Awesome reference. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. I was checking my notes to see if I had more, but I didn't really read it yet. I'm super excited too, but at the same time. Yeah.
I got not much else.
I just don't really think it can be kind of understated how big of an impact his writing has had on the industry.
Oh yeah.
The books came out when I was a younger bartender. I had a couple years of doing actual cocktail work under my belt when this happened, because I came to it late after my undergrad. I didn't start working in like a decent bar until after I had already graduated from Western. The bar I worked at Western was, it was a shot and beer bar, and I worked at an Irish pub, but we didn't do a lot of cocktails. Mm-hmm. So there are people who had put reference books out there that I didn't have anywhere else to go to to get any sort of reference point for my own builds for cocktails. Ted Haig's book, Forgotten Cocktails and Vintage Spirits, David Wondrich's book, and honestly, stuff like, as silly as it sounds, the Difford's Guide, where where Simon Difford, this UK bartender, was just publishing everything, like every single recipe he could possibly find, and putting it out there. And oh my gosh, some of these UK cocktails that were popular in the 90s are horrific sounding.
Lots of Midori.
Yeah, so much Midori. Blue Curacao, really, really, really stupid names, and obviously just massive party drinks. I think if I were drinking cocktails in the Britpop era, it would have been very bad.
The Shagadelic Cosmo.
Yeah, the Shagadelic Cosmo.
Like, tiki cocktails, for instance, kind of span the time, but because some of those do have a lot of juice or syrup,
well, and you've also got these people
generally likable regardless.
And that's a niche that I think everybody helped. That fire was kept smoldering, by the people who were just really into that kind of cocktail. But the stories and the history were massive because it also spoke to the build and the ingredients. That's what makes Wondrich's writings so invaluable if you're getting into this type of work, because everything he writes about the history and how the drinks came to be is also tied into how they're made and why they're made the way that they are. And he's got lots of excellent stuff about the type of sugar or the type of build for prep items.
Right.
Or
why a cordial is more than just juice and sugar, sugar. Like,
all
what's the point of that, and why do we dilute it to a certain degree? Yeah.
And these templates for these drinks, these builds and families and categories are the type of thing that you have to build a foundation for, so that you can go and make new drinks.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to know how to make your daiquiris and your Manhattans and your old fashions and your juleps and your slings and your...
And all of it's very, very entertaining. So if you're a reader...
Yeah, entertaining. And also, like, I made a point to add to my notes that he's also someone who's adamantly pulling for the cocktail industry and craft spirits movement. Like, since the 90s, he's been getting serious about the work, but he's also a patient type. Like, he understands that there's going to be cocktail declines in these periods where people only want high alcohol, and you can only work with the ingredients you have. So if he's going to go to a sports bar, he's not necessarily be like, this Manhattan's friggin' gross.
Exactly.
He knows he's in a sports bar or whatever it is, or that, you haven't read these articles yet or found this information yet, so you're just working with the best that you got. But I mean, for himself, he's won tons of awards. So he's not only great at writing, but he's practiced as well.
Yeah.
I want to say that. So he's a 5-time Tales of the Cocktail Spirited Award winner, once in 2008 for Best New Cocktail Book, Imbibe, and 2009 for Best Cocktail and Spirits Writer for some of his article work with Esquire and Daily Beast. 2011, he gets the Best New Cocktail Bartending Book again for Punch, Spirits Writer again, and then in 2021, most recently, he got it for Best Podcast, Broadcast, or Online Video Series for Life Behind Bars, which he co-hosts with Noah Rothbaum, the writer
guy from
that he did for Oxford Companion.
Fantastic name for a podcast too.
And it also influences a bunch of dudes into buying a bunch of vests and tie pins and waxing their mustaches essentially looking the part, which is an interesting thing about this industry, which I think is kind of
Imbibe it's a fun book because when that came out, almost every bar that called itself a speakeasy bar started to reevaluate what that meant.
Yes.
It's not just a hidden bar or a bar that's connected to a restaurant, but it's its own
started
bar,
to become about the mood and the culture too.
Yeah.
But then you get something that's really dangerous, right? Yeah. Because you can do a lot of surface level stuff, but if the drinks and the service aren't good, then
enjoy your Instagram photos and never come back again.
Exactly right. So his influences, like anybody who's super influential, his influence is very interesting to dissect because you get a lot of people who know the words but not the music, essentially.
Fair, fair.
And who are doing everything on a surface level very, very correct to give you a sense of nostalgia and a sense of otherworldliness when you step into their bar. But then you're paying $15 for a cocktail that isn't any good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting way to put it.
You have to balance it.
The nostalgia is also, so he's also co-founder of the the Museum of the American Cocktail in New Orleans in Louisiana, which I went to recently. So he and Dale DeGroff basically set that up with others to contribute, obviously. But, his writing and his work obviously influences tons of people, but he wants there to be resources literally anywhere and everywhere for people to understand the change. So he wrote a lot about why ice was super important, why the shaker modified, why it's no longer just the Boston glass and the how it changed over time. He has a collection of strainers, I think, just as a personal thing. But
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure there's like a whole like little section in Imbibe just about strainers.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's something he's personally fascinated with, and the way that they do or do not allow ice to be added to the drink after shaking. Like, I get it. That totally makes sense to me. Absinthe spoons are things that I've started to think I should start. Collect. I think I might.
Yeah.
They get really interesting.
Yeah.
There could be like a space cat one, and no one would know.
Very ornate too. Yeah. Excellent. So I think maybe that we need to at least have one more read from the Imbibe book, because I think this section is absolutely hilarious. And then also there's a cocktail I want to talk about too. We'll get into in a second. But going back to vermouth.
Yes.
This is how he opens his section on the Manhattan cocktail. So the vermouth cocktail is no doubt a fine thing, offering, as it does, a bold presence on the palate while still being low in impact. He's talking about a drink that has as its base vermouth. Perhaps the impact is too low. You go to all the trouble of hitching your foot up on the rail, engaging Ed in conversation, supervising his movements as he dashes and splashes and waltzes everything around with ice. And the straining and the twisting and the sliding and the pain. And what do you get for your 15 cents? Something with no more kick to it than the little glass of sherry your maiden aunt takes when the fantods have got her. But what if you put a stick in it? Rye, gin, brandy, it doesn't matter. Just a little something to make you feel like you've had a drink. That's one possibility. On the other hand, there's this one. The whiskey or gin or brandy cocktail is no doubt a fine thing, offering, as it does, a smooth presence on the palate while still being high in impact. Perhaps too high. You go to all the trouble of hitching your foot up on the rail and all the rest, and what do you get for your 15 cents? Drunk. That's what. The problem with these things is they go down so easy that you want to treat your throat to a couple or three just to show your appreciation for the fine job it's been doing you, but the next thing you know, it's next Thursday, and you're in Oakland with what feels like 3 black eyes and an anchor tattooed on your arm. But what if you turned the damper down a little, took that new vermouth stuff, plenty flavorful, but no John L. Sullivan, and replaced some of the booze with it? Maybe you could have a drink or two without all the vaudeville. And that's
a vaudeville.
Excellent excerpt into the history and his general idea of of that time and drinking, which is excellent. And then they have this awesome bit at the end of the book where he basically got a bunch of super famous bartenders to do a cocktail in the Jerry Thomas style. Right. And they were all going to do these little tributes to Jerry Thomas.
That's awesome. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. And one of my favorites, which is just so insane, is Gaz Regan's, because he did something called the parentheses almost end parentheses blow my skull off, which is 2 ounces of cognac and a half ounce each of peach schnapps and a half ounce of Jägermeister, which sounds, I've never, ever tried one. And I'm going to do it someday, but it sounds just insane.
Buy some, like a nib of Jägermeister.
Yeah. But Wondrich's cocktail, which I guess he did assemble people to go to Jerry Thomas's grave, shake up, drink at the gravesite, and then pour one out in tribute.
For the homies.
Is the Tombstone cocktail, which is basically not even a cocktail. It's 2 ounces of 100 proof or 101 proof rye whiskey, which I hope that he means Rittenhouse or Wild Turkey. A teaspoon of rich syrup and 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, shaken.
A shaked old-fashioned in a way.
Basically.
High
it's just so
yeah.
stupid and simple and tastes awesome.
That's what we call metal as fuck.
Yeah, like why all the nonsense? That was the Tombstone cocktail, his tribute to Jerry Thomas.
I wonder if he made all of his BAR, the bar program students do that as well. You know what I mean? Like everyone just after class goes over there. It's like a 5-day intensive course he wrote with Dale DeBrock.
Because he's buried in, I think he's buried in New York.
He's buried in New York, yeah. Apparently a fine little cemetery. I remember listening to him say in an interview.
Until they plow it over and put it in a Starbucks.
For those who don't know, BAR program, it's an acronym, so it's Beverage Alcohol Resource, something that he developed with some others in 2005 just to help people become better, more educated bartenders.
Wow.
Continuing influence in the industry, really.
So,
huge proponent of education.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is.
As an academic, that naturally makes sense.
Yeah.
I think we did a good coverage.
That's our wrap up.
Yeah. So,
thank you, Mr. Wondrich, for. With this show honestly could have been 3 hours long. We could have talked about all of these books and delved into all these recipes. And there's so much to learn just from the stuff that he's put down on paper, let alone his podcast, which is ridiculously informative. So,
or the other bar set, like Bartender at Large and all those other podcasts that he's been featured on.
Yeah,
not even just
exactly. Yeah. So from one small corner of Michigan, thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Heavy metal.
Heavy metal Wondrich. Yeah, exactly. And
he's still a rock star to us.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it from Bar Talk. Cheers for myself, Courtney, and Marc.
Cheers.
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll see you on the flip. Thank you.
On the flip. Later.
Where are my red M&Ms? In a goblet on the table.
The talent is always very.
It's just that I don't ask for much. I want them in prime number denominations. Like I could take 13 of them,
but not 14.
Not 14. Absolutely not.
21.
No. 53. But I want the M&Ms. Maybe sitting around and doing nothing to contribute to a show is helping you rest your knees.